Hi everybody, and welcome to our Thriving LDS Singles Podcast. We're excited to have you here today, and as you can see, I have a whole bunch of friends with me today. So my co-host Kim. Hi Kim.
Hello.
And our regular visitor Juan. Hi Juan.
Hello.
And two that you've met before but might not remember, Sariah. Hi. And Troy. Hi Troy.
Everybody.
So the reason we have a whole group of us today is we're going to discuss conference, and we wanted to get an input from various people about their how they felt about conference and what they learnt and what they saw. So we know there's lots of different ways to approach conference, and Kim was just saying before that she tends to listen to it 3 times with her questions, her calling, and her calling as a single. So she has to listen 3 times at least, which of course is fantastic. I've got the opposite problem in that I'm on the other side of the world, so I don't get to listen to it live at all. So we have various ways of actually even listening to conference. But because I've got the chair right now, I'm going to talk about my favorite book. Yeah, that's right. I'm here. And my favorite one was The Saturday Kevin G. Brown. And I think many people had that as one of their favorites, so it's not going to be a shock to anybody. But I had to who is this guy? And he's from Jamaica, and he had that lovely Jamaican accent, and it was a strong, powerful testimony. So just that passion in his testimony was just so strong, wasn't it? And a number of people I've talked to said the Saturday night was actually their very favoritist of all of the sessions of
social media was going crazy over that talk.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
it was one of the hits.
Yeah.
So powerful and strong and just
Well, he has a different way of presenting too. I think it was even Elder Kieran when he first came on board. That he just has a different way of presenting himself that is just fun to just even see the variety, because he definitely had kind of more that, not really preacher, but just very, like you say, passion about how he presented things. So
I mean, just
I
the
love
title
that
itself.
Too. I love the fact we're seeing different cultures being represented. Like Elder Kieran, isn't his accent? You think my accent's lovely? I loved his. Anyway. Go one. What do we?
I was just gonna say, just the title of his talk, the eternal gift of testimony. Once you get it, you got it. You know what I mean? Even if he goes dormant, I guess, but it's something that you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. You just have to reconnect. It's gonna be there. It's an eternal gift, and that's powerful.
Yeah.
So he was powerful with his testimony, and you could really feel it. So Kim, what was your favorite?
Yeah, I hate this question because I have a really hard time picking a favorite. So I've been thinking about it. There were so many good talks, especially I think from a perspective of speaking to some of the struggles that the singles community has or can have. But I really, really loved Eyring's talk, because I just love that whole concept of proving, and that sometimes the Lord puts us through really hard things, not because he's not there, but because he is proving us and refining us. And I love that whole concept and the whole analogy of making steel stronger through the proving process. I thought was just beautiful. So I really love that one. What do you guys think about that one? Or did you guys have a reaction to that one?
Yeah, from his talk, he said the prophet Moroni, for instance, was proved and strengthened in such a way he lived his final years alone. He wrote that he had no friends, that his father had been killed, that his people had been destroyed. He was hunted by those who sought his life. Yet Moroni did not despair. Instead, he engraved his testimony of Jesus Christ on plates for people who would not live to see. Yeah. And I
Ooh,
that just the word, whenever the word alone comes up, right? Like we as singles, we feel the aloneness a lot and hunted by those who sought his life. If we're in difficult divorce situations or whatnot, we can feel like we've been abandoned and
or under
deeply
attack
disliked
even.
or under attack,
Yeah.
right?
In some form or another. It's so true.
But
And I love that he used Moroni. Yeah.
Mm.
mhm.
All right. So Juan, what was your favorite?
One of those talks that really stood out to me was the one by Elder Brick V. Iyer. Just that phrase in his talk, he said, "God is in the pursuit of you." That was so powerful to me because it just gave me this image of this God that's constantly doing everything that he can through people, through different circumstances to get our attention. And this whole talk to me was about just having that intimacy, like this God who's um who's crazy about us, the ones that relationship, that intimacy, and that's what that talk just kind of
Well, and just because we've
reminded
talked
me.
a lot about Moses, because I know you have
Oh,
a
yes.
special kind of connection to that.
Moses.
He talked about that the adversary, that there was this kind of interaction that he referenced that I
Yeah.
thought is really easy for us to get stuck in of no, we are Heavenly Father's children, and the adversary kind of twists that. I think he referenced the Moses, son of man, and trying to put Moses back in the place of you're part of this world instead of
Just
divine.
human.
Yeah. He was trying to humanize him instead. And I really liked that part of his talk.
And I like that. I like that because that's one of the things with the adversary is to humanize even God. We tend to humanize God so much. And one of the things that I love about Moses, and this actually stood out in this talk as well, is about this process. When Moses leaves Egypt and he's in the desert for 40 years or so before he has that burning bush experience. Up until then, he only knew about the traditional God, through his father-in-law. But it's when, and even in the burning bush experience, he was still confused for him. It was confusing. But then when he has that vision that is mentioned in this talk, that's when God becomes intimate
Yeah.
to Moses. And actually, God goes from that traditional God to the personal God. And he begins that process of intimacy. That's what this talk spoke so much to me about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It was a really good talk.
And Sariah, what about you?
We always there's so many, right? There were quite a few for different reasons, but I think the one I would want to share is Elder Holland's talk. I just had a really powerful experience with that one, partly because I was in the conference center for that one, and my seat was very close, just like a few seats away from the wall, and my view was a direct view to the side of the stand. And what you wouldn't see if you weren't there was that before Elder Holland spoke and there was the music playing, while the choir was singing, there were three men came up to him, and he was wearing oxygen the whole time. But they came up to him and they were so tender, and they removed his oxygen and they wiped his face and they lifted him up and they put him on this lower chair. And then it took these three men to raise his chair up. And then they straightened his suit and fixed his hair and his tie and everything. And this took a while. And then the last one patted him on the back and left. And then the screen comes on where you see he's straight on, he looks adjusted and correct. But what you didn't see was the behind the scenes love and intense, tender care that these men had for Elder Holland. And it was so deeply touching to watch their care. And then Elder Holland, of course, gives this like so personal talk, and he kind of covered a few things, but my favorite was his testimony of the Book of Mormon. I mean, he just he just really, in his aging, right? Like he talked about how he couldn't sing at the end. And I mean, that he is struggling with his health, but he gave a testimony of the Book of Mormon. And I think, I can't help but wonder if that largely came from President Nelson talking so much about the power of reading the Book of Mormon. And there's a quote from President Nelson that has been really dear to my heart recently that says, "My dear brothers and sisters, I promise that as you prayerfully study the Book of Mormon every day, you will make better decisions every day. I promise that as you ponder what you study, the windows of heaven will open and you will receive answers to your questions and direction for your own life." And as a single, like, we need direction. Like we need the testimony that Elder Holland shared of the power of the Book of Mormon to guide us in these choices that we are facing. And then his sweet singing at the end, it was
cute,
just, that's me.
Yeah. He had one of the quotes I really liked from his, let me see if I can find it. It's, "The Book of Mormon is a rod of safety for the soul." I love that thought. "A light of revelation and illumination of the path." And that was just a little piece of it, but he did have a really, well, he kind of was, like you said, he touched on a lot of different things. It was interesting, but definitely the Book of Mormon.
He talked about the clay, and the
the
spittle.
spit and clay. A lot of people focused on that part, huh?
I mean, and the message on that is that, God can use whatever, you know what I mean? He's a reminder that, just based on my own personal experiences, like, when I look at people like leaving the church or whatever, because somebody said this and that, like one of the things that I try to tell people is God placed you here. You know what I mean? Like God's always he's going to use something, and whatever that is.
There's a reason
that
exactly. This came across your path.
Exactly.
Whatever.
You know what I mean? And so yeah, that was awesome. God is God, like it doesn't matter whatever he's going to use. It's up to us to be aware of God's intervention and be faithful to that.
I want to add to that what you said, Juan, about Elder Holland. That was one of my favorite parts of conference too. And what you just referenced, he said these very unlikely ingredients, mud, the clay that was made by spit in the dirt, declare that God can bless us by whatever method he chooses. And sometimes we're looking for a method that like is the one we want or in the time frame we want.
Exactly.
And it doesn't come that way and we get disappointed. But we looked at the Savior and he healed in so many different ways, and some required a period of time, some required steps the person had to take. Other times the Savior just came and healed on the spot.
Yeah.
And so in our healing, it may be quick, it may be long, it may be in the middle, it may come in different ways. And I think this is beautiful.
I mean, that was the issue with the Pharisees. That's why the Pharisees didn't see Jesus, because they were so stuck in the way they saw things, in the way that in their mind God needed to be. And we tend to do that. And that's what I mean by humanizing God, by having this human idea that limits God in our lives because of how we want to see him. And that's not good, because God is a mysterious God. If we have figured God out, then he ceases to be God,
Well, what's interesting about Elder Holland too is, how, I don't know if you thought of him this way, but he's the second most senior apostle now, but he's also the most senior leader that's a single adult member of the church. And it's wonderful to see his power coming forth out of that pulpit, and the fire of faith that is in his bones and in his heart that comes out. And it's wonderful to see that example.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So it did feel a little bit like a farewell talk, didn't it? And I guess he is very ill. And I love that, Sariah, telling us that behind the scenes story. Like we're talking about a very sick guy who is, and
I didn't see that.
No,
I noticed
To me, he looked like better than last conference.
Yeah, I noticed he didn't have his oxygen. I said, "Oh, look, he doesn't have his oxygen," but
Yeah.
you didn't know what happened behind the scenes.
Yeah. So it was a powerful talk, and by no means a beautiful singing, and yet you felt the words of the song he sung, didn't you? Like you could feel the passion behind the song.
Yes.
Yeah. And Troy, what was yours?
Mine was a toss-up between Elder Holland and Elder Brown, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Elder Brown's, and so much power, and I just felt that just really just come at me in a great way, and I just sat up and listened, and any tiredness I had listening to it just went away. It was so powerful, and a couple of things he said that I think were my favorite parts of this talk. He talks about this testimony. It should not have an expiration date. It should not weaken or diminish because something in my life has changed or something in the world has changed. And of course, I thought about that and my condition of not wanting a divorce. And now I find myself single. It's like, well, my testimony, like it shouldn't weaken or diminish because something in my life has changed, such as something earth-shattering in your life. And then he says later on, if we find our testimony weakening, remember that it is the choices we make that diminish the power of the testimony. But the testimony has not gone anywhere. We just need to choose to reconnect with it. And it was a great reminder for me of like, oh, if I'm feeling, and I have in my journey, at times you start feeling a bit of a distance, and then it's like, yep, that's me. Actually, it's not God. There's scriptures that back this up. If you would draw near unto me, and I will draw near unto you. And so he's asking us to draw near unto him. And so I love the truths that Elder Brown taught about testimony and how really, hey, take charge of your testimony, and God is always there, and we need to do the work to reconnect with him, and he's always there, and he doesn't ever change. He's an unchangeable God. And that was, I kind of knew some of these things, but in my head, but it really sunk in deeper in my heart, and powerful talk.
I love those. That one thing he said. I read it real quick. He said, "Why do we have agency to choose good, to choose Christ, to choose eternal life again and again?" We're gonna have those challenging moments. Where else are we going to turn to? And we may be tempted, we may be discouraged to turn to something else. But I love that he said that we need to turn to God, to good, to Christ, time and again. And that's how we maintain a testimony. That's how we maintain a closeness to God. Otherwise, we will be taken by the adversary,
Yeah, so true.
I was actually interested to like, well, who is this guy? Like, who is he? And because it was only sustained as the 70, in the last conference. So he's like, oh, okay, that's why I don't know who he is. But I think I read an article about how, like, he was talking about the testimony and, to find our own sacred grove. And in his story, he talks about his bathroom was his sacred grove, because that was the only place in his house where he got some quiet and privacy. But
all single moms can relate to that.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes that's not even the place.
That's right.
Feels more like
we tend to think of a sacred grove. We've got to find this really nice place and this beautiful place, and it's like, no, it can be the bathroom. It's
I think it would be interesting to the listeners to kind of have a tiny bit of background about Elder Brown and what his calling was before he was sustained and had a kind of a role in singles in Utah. Troy, do you want to share that?
Yeah, what's interesting about him, he was in Area 70 in the South Jordan Coordinating Council up until his call. And in fact, we started, some of you know this, we have a Come Follow Me Single Adult Gospel Study group every Monday here. And he was the sponsor of it as an Area 70 to get this going and off the ground. And we have 80 to 100 singles every week come to this. And he helped sponsor it. He helped get the funding for our refreshments and the other supplies. He came and taught us twice, actually, and with power, and the same type of power. And it's wonderful to see he's championed, supporting the singles in a very beautiful way. That's been very precious.
That is special. I think it comes, so I did a little bit of digging into his background, because I was like, who is this guy? And so his father died when he was 5, and his mother wasn't a member. So he grew up in a single mother home, his grandmother was the church member, but she was fairly inconsistent. So he used to walk to church about 2 miles. As a 12-year-old, he would walk to church by himself. And he was a sister missionary saw him one day and dared him to read the Book of Mormon. And she showed him a triple combination. So obviously he's grown up in some poverty. And she showed him this triple combination and said, if you read the Book of Mormon, you can have this. I'll give it to you. And so he was like, yes, I want one of those. And, proceeded to sit and read the Book of Mormon. And that was when he had his big Sacred Grove moment in the bathroom, was when he was praying about the Book of Mormon as a 12-year-old on this dare from this sister missionary. And he was all excited the next week and went to church and told her about the fact he'd received this testimony. And she gave him this combination. And he said, but I haven't finished the Book of Mormon. And she said, that was never the point. That was...
Wow.
And yeah, I just thought, so when you hear about, when he gives this talk about the Sacred Grove moment, knowing that part of the background story of that that's what he means about his Sacred Grove moment, is that a 12-year-old in a single mother household with, very little, and yet he got that strong testimony and has obviously kept that testimony right through. And it just made that testimony to me even stronger, because it wasn't that he grew up and everything was hunky-dory and had a great life. He'd struggled.
Yeah.
So a 12-year-old though, walking to church, my 12-year-olds didn't do that. But isn't it fascinating? Like, many of us get our testimonies of the church as teenagers, and yet teenagers are the group that leave the church. And I find that fascinating, just a side note.
Yeah.
But he was a young.
Yeah. We also all acknowledge the importance of President Oak's talk, but to Kay's point about the 12-year-old, I was the mother that drove my 12-year-old to church and dropped her off and went and had breakfast and came back. I laugh, but it's an uncomfortable laugh because it just makes me sad. But yeah, so she didn't walk, but yeah, she went on her own and got dropped off.
And the story just from the missionary's point of view. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear that sister missionary's part of that story, because was she inspired? Was it just a dare? Was it just chatting with a 12-year-old? Did she, and yet it was a pivotal moment in his life. Anyway, so yes, if any, and just from Facebook, we were saying before, Facebook lit up over this talk, and the number of people that commented that they had gone inactive or were non-members and were affected by that testimony. So if you listen to no other talk, listen to that one just for its pure testimony, the strength of its testimony.
Yeah. But I would say this particular conference, I felt like there were so many deep and meaningful talks that applied very directly to the single community in all the sessions. I don't know what you guys thought, but I could go through and kind of and the Saturday night session, I feel like all of those talks, even if it was ministering to the one, I think that's a really important thing when it comes to the singles. But so those Saturday evening talks, Sister Dennis's talk, there was just talk after talk, I felt like in that Saturday evening, maybe even all of them that resonated.
That was what I was told. Go watch the Saturday evening so that's the one I've actually watched. The other thing about the Saturday evening one was the multicultural choir.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And
it was.
And this one of the songs they sung is a traditional Tongan song, but they sang it in English. But somehow you could hear it in Tongan. I don't know. It was
you just get that sense, huh?
Got the sense it had that rhythm to it. Jesus is the way. And I love the fact, I guess coming from the other side of the world, I love the fact that the church is finally recognizing its multicultural identity.
Yeah, that we're a world church, a whole world church, not just
a whole world church. And we're seeing that now with these speakers from all over the place, and the songs and our new hymn book that's bringing in songs from all over the world, and they're now singing them at conference. So I believe, was it all the songs at conference were from the new hymn book? Is that right?
I don't know.
Just the Saturday night ones. I'm not sure, but all the Saturday night ones were from the new hymn book.
Yeah, I don't think all of them, because I know there were some traditional ones. Like, what was the one you said? I haven't heard that song, and then they played it at the end.
Oh, Can Come You Saints.
Yeah,
that was like the last song. I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
nice.
I'm
hoping for an apostle from Africa. I would love to see that.
Stay tuned. I think that Africa is in such a growth that yes, we will see that.
So that'll be super awesome.
Listen to that song. It's called Jesus is the Way. I don't know how we were going to sing it as a congregation, because they sung it in parts and it was just amazing. But all of those songs were, I thought, I'm looking forward to this new hymn book.
I just want to make a plug for when you go into the app, and it's you can pull up the new hymns, and there's this part at the bottom of the new hymns where you can say about this hymn. And what's really beautiful about that hymn, Jesus is the Way, that it talks about how that song was written. And it was written back in 1916 by a 27-year-old man who would walk to church 3 miles across the island. And anyway, it's just, when you know the history of these new hymns, it just makes them so much more powerful. And so it was fun to when they were singing that hymn, and I was like, what hymn is that? You look it up in the new hymn book and you can read about that history. And so a lot of people don't know that little.
That's cool. That's cool.
There.
I'm gonna.
That's wonderful, isn't it? I remember I was in a choir once with the song "Be Still My Soul," and before we started learning it, she told us the story of that song, and boy, does that add power to the song. It
does.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So each of the new hymn, almost every new hymn has a little story about it at the bottom, and they're just really amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I'll have to look those up.
So yes, if you want to listen to just one session of conference, our pick is the Saturday night one.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the Saturday evening one? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, Sister Dennis, I took a bunch of notes from her talk, and because as I was looking through it, and one lens of being single and kind of single adults, she quoted President Nelson about, hey, if a couple in your ward gets divorced, or a young missionary returns home early, or a teenager doubts his testimony, they do not need your judgment. They need to experience the pure love of Jesus Christ reflected in your words and actions. And I thought, that's such a great thing to emphasize and say again, because it's pretty difficult to do sometimes, and that can be very hurtful to people in those situations and situations like those, where it seems like, oh, now they're different than maybe what the ideal of the church teaches. And so I love how she just emphasized that, and she said, we're here to develop Christ-like attributes and eventually become like our Savior. His is not a gospel of checklists, it's a gospel of becoming. And I love that quote about not checklists, it's about becoming. And let's go away from the Pharisaical kind of way of looking at the gospel and becoming as Jesus Christ is. And so there's some great things in her talk that those are two of the points. And the third would be, she talked about her own depression, which was great to see that vulnerability come across the pulpit. And we saw that in multiple places, and we heard that from at least 3 people. They just talk about their own big mistake and their own big issue. And one of them once, I forget who it was, talked about, was Elder Cook, who talked about his wife. It's something that is one of the apostles that talked about doing something that he needed to apologize for with his wife. And so it was great to see that vulnerability. And we could see hey, they're human like us and they struggle. And Sister Dennis talked about her own struggle. And that really helped me connect to her talk and her message when she said, hey, I couldn't feel the Holy Ghost for a time when I was feeling depressed. And that's very real for so many people that deal with depression. As we know, as single adults, oftentimes there's depression that comes with divorce or becoming widowed or not being married. And so I think there's some really good things that relate.
Mhm.
Yep.
All right. All right.
I would like to say, are there other things or just important kind of one-liners or messages that came from other?
Well, the very first talk was right off the
Yeah.
bat, like, everything that's been going on lately, with this whole political stuff going on,
Yeah.
the division that had been taking place, all the mean posts I have received.
You've personally experienced it.
But I love that. And I just
There was a
love,
definite theme, wasn't there, of peacemaking through everybody's talk, which
yeah,
probably wasn't a big surprise, that one, but it was nice to hear that theme coming
Yeah.
through.
but I love what he said, that peace, as a peacemaker, it begins in the most basic
Mhm.
place, which is the heart, which is with you, and which implies we need, again, that relationship with God, because that He is the source of peace. He is the
Mm.
greatest peacemaker, right? And unless we are connected to Him, it's going to be chaos within us, and we're going to just express that out to others and join those that are also chaotic.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
destroy the world.
Get sucked in by that, huh? Is there anything else you want to touch on? Gosh, there's so many talks that I think we just probably won't have time. We'll have to figure out another way.
Elder Gong with his "No One Should Sit Alone." I guess that's a single, like for the singles, that's really important.
Yeah.
Because that's what we feel, isn't it? That we feel alone and we do sit alone.
Yeah.
And I noticed that with the men more, Troy, the men really sit alone. At least the women do have a bit of a pew with the few of them together. But,
yeah, that is true for men. I probably feel more alone.
Imagine if no one sat alone at church and no one felt alone.
So I have to say something about that because I am very introverted and I love to sit alone. So when he was talking about that, I like my space. I like to have usually some kind of notepad, and I like to make notes, and I don't want somebody sitting reading my notes I'm making.
You're like,
so
no,
yeah.
nobody comes sit
So I'm
by
like the
me.
only single that really does love to sit alone, which is not a good thing, but
But you never.
You know what's interesting is that this goes to a really good principle, and that is like what is problematic for one single may be good for another, and so
Yes.
knowing the needs of every individual is like super important. In our Come Follow Me class I referenced earlier, we had one brother talk about it at length, about how difficult it was because he was sitting by himself when he got divorced. Now he's by himself and no one would sit around him. They would literally like go all around him, but not come into him. And it was so hurtful. And he just expressed this hurt and everybody was just feeling so bad. And then a sister in the back raised her hand. And she's like, everybody smothers me. And I just wish that, I could kind of have a little space. So it was just like, yeah, everybody has a different story and situation.
So does that go back to we should do ministering and get to know the one? Is that what you're trying to say, Troy?
Yeah.
There you go.
Hey, you know who I really enjoyed watching? Hold on, this thing is kind of weird. That brother, Elder John D. Amos, is that right?
Amos. I don't know. Let me see if I have
he
notes
was
on
he was
his.
from New Orleans, I think.
Oh yeah.
He
about
like
the
reminded me of
sauce, the
Obama.
seasoning.
But he was pretty cool. I mean, he was just like really relaxed, very laid back. Like he would have been such a fun
mission
president. I mean, I could see him like playing basketball with the guys. Like he was really, really cool. I really enjoyed it, just the way he spoke, and his message was good for sure. But yeah, just his deliverance. He was just like, I don't know. Do you guys connected at all with him?
That resonated with me so much, Juan, as well. When I heard that casual, just friendly, hey, I'm sitting with you in a room and we're friends, type of feel. I loved his delivery or his communication style. It was really great. And his message stuck with me, I think, as a result of it. Like, oh, he's talking about the recipe, the Creole and the recipe and of the gospel. And that was great. It was one of the highlights for me too.
Oh, thank you everybody for listening to our discussion on conference. And let us know what your favourite talks were, what things that you heard and learnt from it, and what was the most passion. How did you feel about the songs and the music and and Elder Brown's talk? All right, thank you. And we will talk again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.